wake up at 5:30 in the morning, you lace up your shoes, you head to the gym before most people even open their eyes. You push hard. Cardio, weights, HIIT, you sweat, you hurt, you earn it. And then you come home, eat clean, track your macros, hit your calorie deficit. You do this 4, 5, 6 days a week, and the belly fat doesn't move. Maybe it fluctuates. Maybe you lose a little in your face, your arms, your legs, but the abdomen, the visceral fat around your organs stays exactly where it is. You push harder. You add another session. You cut more calories, and nothing changes. If this sounds familiar, this video is going to explain exactly why, and the answer is going to completely change how you think about exercise, fat loss, and what your body actually needs to release visceral fat. But first, I need to introduce you to someone. Meet David. David is 47 years old. He's been training consistently for 3 years, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. He runs 4 miles most mornings. He does resistance training 3 times a week. He eats in a calorie deficit. He tracks everything. By every conventional measure, David is doing everything right. He's lost weight. His arms are leaner. His legs are stronger. But his belly, the stubborn, visceral fat that sits deep around his organs, has barely changed. And the most frustrating part isn't the physical result. It's the mental exhaustion of doing everything right and watching your body refuse to cooperate. David came to the conclusion that he just wasn't trying hard enough. So he added another morning session, woke up earlier, pushed harder, and his cortisol went through the roof. His sleep got worse, his hunger increased, and his belly fat got slightly worse. Not better, worse. David didn't have a discipline problem. David had a biology problem, and nobody had ever explained it to him. Here's what almost nobody tells you about intense morning workouts and belly fat. And it changes everything. Your body does not respond to effort the way you think it does. It responds to signals. And the most powerful signal for visceral fat storage or visceral fat release is not how many calories you burned this morning. It's your cortisol level. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and your body cannot distinguish between the stress of a brutal 5 a.m. HIIT session and the stress of being chased by a predator. To your biology, intense physical stress is threat stress, and the response to threat stress is always the same. Cortisol rises, insulin follows, and visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat packed around your organs, gets a direct signal to stay locked, to be protected. Because from a survival standpoint, visceral fat is your emergency energy reserve, and when your body thinks you are under threat, it does not release emergency reserves. It protects them every single time. This is the mechanism that David's 6-day-per-week brutal training schedule was triggering, not fat release, fat protection. And it gets worse. Here's where the biology becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Because the harder David trained, the more this cycle compounded. Chronic high-intensity exercise in a calorie deficit is one of the most powerful cortisol drivers in existence. A 2025 review published in Sports Medicine analyzed 16 separate studies on cortisol response to exercise and found that chronic endurance training combined with a calorie deficit consistently elevated baseline cortisol levels by 30 to 45% above normal resting levels within 6 to 8 weeks. 30 to 45%. That's not a temporary spike after a hard session. That's a chronically elevated cortisol baseline that persists throughout the day, during meals, during sleep, during rest. And chronically elevated cortisol does 3 specific things that directly destroy visceral fat loss progress. First, it increases insulin resistance in visceral fat tissue, making it harder for your body to access stored fat for energy. Second, it stimulates the enzyme lipoprotein lipase in abdominal adipose tissue, which is the enzyme responsible for pulling fat from the bloodstream and storing it in the belly. Third, it suppresses testosterone and growth hormone, the 2 hormones most responsible for maintaining muscle mass and driving overnight fat metabolism. David wasn't failing to lose belly fat because he wasn't working hard enough. He was failing because his training was creating the exact hormonal environment that makes visceral fat loss biologically impossible. And now the twist that nobody in the fitness industry wants to admit. The people who lose the most visceral fat are not the people who train the hardest. The research is remarkably consistent on this point. A landmark 2025 study published in the Journal of Obesity compared 4 groups of adults over 40 with similar calorie deficits. Group 1 did high-intensity cardio 5 days per week. Group 2 did moderate resistance training 3 days per week plus daily walking. Group 3 did daily walking only. Group 4 made no exercise changes. After 6 months, the results were stunning. Group 1 The high-intensity cardio group lost the least visceral fat of the 3 exercise groups. Group 2, resistance training plus walking, lost the most visceral fat, and Group 3, walking only, lost more visceral fat than Group 1, despite doing dramatically less total exercise. The difference was not calories burned. The difference was cortisol. High-intensity cardio elevated cortisol chronically. Walking lowered it. Resistance training created an anabolic hormonal response that improved insulin sensitivity without triggering the chronic cortisol elevation that blocks fat release. The body responded to the signal, not the effort, and the signal from walking said safe. The signal from brutal daily cardio said threat. Visceral fat responds to threat by staying exactly where it is. So what does a morning routine that actually burns visceral fat look like? The first element is replacing chronic cardio with resistance training, not eliminating cardio entirely, but stopping the pattern of daily high-intensity cardio as the primary fat loss tool. 2 to 3 resistance training sessions per week is the evidence-based sweet spot for adults over 40 trying to reduce visceral fat. Resistance training builds lean muscle mass, and lean muscle mass is the single most powerful long-term driver of insulin sensitivity. The more insulin sensitive your muscle tissue becomes, the more efficiently your body can pull glucose out of the bloodstream without needing a large insulin response. And lower baseline insulin means your body spends more time in fat-burning mode throughout the day, not just during the workout. A 2025 meta-analysis in sports medicine confirmed that adults over 40 who added resistance training without changing their diet lost on average 17% more visceral fat over 6 months than those who did cardio only, even when total weekly calorie burn was identical. The type of stress matters. Resistance training tells your body to build. Chronic cardio in a deficit tells your body it is starving and under threat. The second element is the morning walk. Not a power walk, not an incline treadmill session, a genuine easy walk, a pace where you could hold a full conversation without breathing hard for 15 to 20 minutes after waking. This is not intuitive for people like David who are used to measuring progress by intensity. But here is the mechanism. Gentle morning movement activates what researchers call the parasympathetic nervous system reset. It signals your body that the night is over, movement is safe, and resources are available. It lowers the cortisol awakening response, the natural spike of cortisol that happens in the first 30 to 45 minutes after waking. When you immediately replace that cortisol spike with a brutal workout, you amplify it. You send the threat signal at the exact moment your body is most hormonally impressionable. When you replace it with a gentle walk, you send the safety signal. Cortisol peaks and then begins to drop on schedule. Insulin stays lower, and the fat-burning window that opens in the morning stays open longer instead of being slammed shut by the hormonal response to intense exercise. The third element is the feeding window anchor. This is where most people who train hard make their second critical mistake. After an intense morning workout, hunger is often suppressed temporarily by adrenaline and cortisol, so people skip breakfast or eat very little. Then 3 hours later, the cortisol crash hits and hunger becomes uncontrollable. They eat quickly, often choosing high glycemic foods because their blood sugar has dropped. Insulin spikes. The cortisol-insulin cycle that locks visceral fat in place gets another activation. The fix is eating a moderate protein and fat-based meal within 90 minutes of waking, regardless of whether you feel hungry. A 2025 study in Nutrients confirmed that a morning meal anchored in protein and healthy fat within 90 minutes of waking reduces cortisol levels over the following 4 hours by an average of 22% compared to skipping breakfast or eating a high-carbohydrate morning meal. The meal sends a safety signal to the hypothalamus. Resources are available. The threat response can stand down. And when the threat response stands down, visceral fat becomes accessible. Now here's the additional piece that most people who train hard never consider, and it is the one that ties everything together into a complete picture. Sleep is where visceral fat is actually metabolized, not during the workout, not during the walk. During deep non-REM sleep, specifically in the first 2 to 3 hours after falling asleep, growth hormone surges, and growth hormone is the primary hormone responsible for breaking down visceral fat and using it for cellular repair and energy. Research published in Cell in 2025 confirmed that growth hormone release during sleep can account for up to 70% of daily fat oxidation in metabolically healthy adults. 70%, which means the workout is the setup. Sleep is where the fat actually burns. And here is the devastating irony for people like David. Chronic, high-intensity training in a calorie deficit suppresses growth hormone during sleep. It does this through two mechanisms. First, chronically elevated cortisol directly inhibits growth hormone release at the pituitary level. Second, the physical demand of frequent, intense training without adequate recovery prevents the body from reaching the deep, slow-wave sleep stages where growth hormone peaks. David was training so hard that he was suppressing the very hormone responsible for burning the fat he was trying to lose. Every additional session he added made the problem worse, not better. And now, the final twist, the one that reframes everything. Here's the truth about why some people seem to lose belly fat effortlessly, while others grind for years without results. It is not genetics. It is not metabolism. It is cortisol baseline. The people who lose visceral fat consistently are the people whose daily life keeps cortisol low enough for the fat-burning window to stay open. They are not necessarily training less, but they are training smarter. They are not creating chronic stress with their workout. They are creating acute recoverable stress followed by genuine recovery. They are walking in the morning instead of sprinting. They are lifting weights 2 or 3 times a week instead of doing HIIT 6 days a week. They are eating enough to keep cortisol from spiking at mealtime. They are protecting their sleep so growth hormone can do its job overnight. They are not fighting their biology. They are working with it. And the result is a body that feels safe enough to release the emergency fat reserves it has been protecting for years. Here is your new morning protocol starting tomorrow. Replace one high-intensity cardio session this week with a 15-minute easy walk after waking. Add one resistance training session if you don't already have them. Eat a protein and fat-based meal within 90 minutes of waking. Set your bedroom to 66 degrees tonight and stop eating 3 hours before sleep. Do not add more sessions. Do not increase intensity for the next 3 weeks. Less is the protocol. Your body does not need more effort. It needs a different signal. And when you give it that signal consistently, the belly fat that has been locked in place for months or years will finally have the hormonal permission it needs to go. Drop a comment right now and tell me, how many days per week are you currently training? I want to know. And if this video finally explained why pushing harder hasn't been working, subscribe, because next week we're going deep on exactly why your liver is the hidden controller of visceral fat and the specific morning habits that either unlock fat burning or keep it blocked all day. That video connects directly to everything we covered today. You will not want to miss it.